Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is VIK Rajan. My firm is called PhoneBlogger.net, and we're a marketing firm predominantly for law firms and accounting firms where they grow their clientele through word-of-mouth referrals, but are too busy to do their own blogging, their own LinkedIn, their own email newsletters. We interview them over the telephone and then turn their words into polished, edited articles for their website, etc. In that perspective, we actually got started into this world originally as practice marketing advisors, and then originally from that, marketing advisors to the small business community. So understanding that world is extremely important to us. So there are handouts there that we can kind of follow along, but I'd like to even hear from you guys and interrupt me, and as you interrupt me, you'll get fresh baked cookies, so that's a nice incentive. There you go, then there's an example. So first and foremost is kind of understanding what to look for when buying a business, and of course the reasons for not buying a business, and things that you could share with your clients, or things that you should also look for yourself if you're buying another practice. One of the things I tend to look at is the marketing system. As opposed to, let's say that they have a marketing process, marketing campaigns, marketing materials, very often businesses will have marketing materials from business cards, websites, brochures, and there are about 7 different types of marketing materials. It spells a handy acronym called WATERS, W-A-T-E-R-S. Won't go through all 6 and 7 types of marketing materials, but if you go onto YouTube and you actually just type in my name, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff. One of the things you'll find is something called the Practice Marketing Cheat Sheet. And it's something that I did not include today because I didn't want to really go over time because I only have about 20 to 25 minutes. But the Practice Marketing Cheat Sheet shows a variety of aspects of all things that a business or a practice could do. It's not everything that they should do in marketing, but it's all the things that they could do. So it lists as a handy checklist all the different types of marketing collateral or marketing materials from websites, business cards, etc., as well as all the marketing channels that there are, from word of mouth to telemarketing to even street-oriented type marketing. So it's a pretty exhaustive checklist, and from there we're able to develop marketing action plans and marketing campaigns. The reason I bring it up, I think it was a couple of months ago at the National Conference of CPA Practitioners. A couple of us know about NCPAP. They're very big on Long Island. They're large nationally, but very large on Long Island. And I did a seminar for them around the Practice Marketing Cheat Sheet, specifically for the CPA community. So if you're interested in kind of marketing for your own firm, check that out. You're able to print that document out and even give it to your clients who are small business owners and help them understand that this is a plethora of what they can do. It's not necessarily what they should do, and they should really kind of be more prioritized with that, or work with a marketing advisor, etc. All of that are unnecessary when it looks at a system. Because a system need not be all those disparate materials. In fact, if one could say an easy, handy definition of any system is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So just because there are these disparate parts, it's not necessarily a system. And how do we actually put together a system so that there is something of value that can be passed on? There could be a very wonderful sales professional in that company, and that's a key person issue. There could be a very awesome CRM, a customer or contact relationship management tool, a CRM software, but that can nonetheless break down. It can be even obsolete over time, or all the data could be lost. Then you could have even the concept of documentation and other types of marketing materials, but again, those can over a period of time just wither away. How can we look at the process where they're continuously working on a prospecting system and continuously looking at a closing system? So when you look at it in the handout, you'll see that there are essentially 3 aspects that we do look at in terms of a marketing system. There's the people, there's the processes, and then the property. And what do I mean essentially first when it comes to marketing is looking at the property, and if you could kind of follow along here, are looking at the marketing assets. Now, one of the things that you would very often find, that could find on some of the financial statements, are some type of value of goodwill or intellectual property in terms of a brand. And those are things that very often we want to look at in terms of a company, of what are they doing to fuel that. Now, if that's not in their perspective, it becomes an issue where how are we evaluating the actual marketing aspect of the company? It's one of the things that separates, for example, a traditional business from, let's say, a franchise type company. Franchise is very often, one of their main value is that they are offering systems and processes to the franchisees. Franchisor is offering that to the franchisees. And in that sense, they're looking very often at the operational system, how they're handling the supply chain management, how they're handling the operational aspects of it. But very often a franchise, the real value is the marketing aspect of it, that they have a brand and that they have a marketing process, a marketing system. In that similar vein is really looking at it from a traditional standalone business. They may have 2 or 3 locations. It could be a single location business, but do they have a marketing concept right there? So in terms of understanding that, we then go into, if they have that concept of a brand, how are we even evaluating that? And there are a variety of techniques to that we can't really go into today, but there are actual ways of, and some of us, any valuation, CVAs or any other certified valuation, do you look at all when you look at a CVA, when you're looking at evaluating a?
Yes, definitely.
You want to share like the kind of example that you look at?
That's Phil, by the way.
Hi, Phil. You get a free cookie.
I got one already.
Yeah, he was helping.
My stomach can't handle more.
Fair enough.
No, for example, I just sold a software company, and the buyer took ownership of the brand, and the 2 entities that were sold needed to rename themselves, relist with the government, you know, and no longer have access to the website, to the 800 number, you know. So that brand was definitely, and it had been in the industry for 30 years.
Right. So there's real equity built into that.
Value, yeah. Of the $4 million, I'd give $1 million to the brand, $2 million to the customers, because it was about 6,000.
And it's going to be my second topic, so thank you.
Because there's only
Of course.
$250,000 profit.
So literally half the value is brand, and then the other half, or a third of it was on a brand, more or less, and then another quarter. Thank you. I'm not an accountant. Can't do math. That's why I went to marketing. Numbers mean nothing. And then another quarter went into the customer base. And when you look at customer base from a marketing standpoint, that's what we're talking about in terms of a CRM. Did they have some sophisticated way of actually monitoring and managing the customers? They use ACT. So ACT is a CRM. There are a number of them, Salesforce, and it need not be a proprietary. It need not be a standalone software. It's really looking at the database of the customers, and more importantly, it's the relationships they have with that customer. And that can go both ways. Very often you find, right, when a business is being bought and sold, there has to be a transition. And the whole point of it, very often a transition, is that the owner or the lead team has such a relationship with the customer or clientele that there needs to be that transition, or else the whole thing will collapse. And that's really kind of the cutting of both ways of looking at the relationships between you and the customer, or the business owner and the customer. However, the customer information, the data, needs to be captured in some type of business software. And it could be ACT, and it could be something proprietary, and it could be something that's even just homegrown, which you could call proprietary, but it's just homegrown in that perspective. Any questions when it comes to looking at the property of how people are actually doing this in terms of capturing customer data, or even looking at brand management? Another aspect, yeah, please.
I was dealing with a business broker.
Yep.
And she was trying to sell the business, and what she did not know, or the owners of the business didn't tell her, was, or they weren't aware, they didn't own the rights to the website.
Right.
They had hired a graphic arts firm.
Yeah.
And their whole business was web driven.
Correct.
So basically you couldn't sell the business.
Yes.
Unless you paid off the...
Or wrestle away. Sometimes it's done malevolently, sometimes it's done ignorantly, but that's a big thing, and thank you for bringing that up. Ownership of property is very often who owns the domain name or the multiple domain names of the business. And I'm sure most of us know that a website can have multiple domain names, and domain name or URL or website address, these are all synonyms for the most part. And you could do a very quick whois search. You could use GoDaddy, you could use a variety of services of GoDaddy/whois. As one word, and just type in the website domain address and see literally who owns it. It just happened last weekend. I was at a conference talking to a law firm, and they were having all sorts of issues of getting their website updated. A little bit off topic, but very related to this topic. And I'm like, well, and they're like, yeah, but we're trying to switch, but we don't know if we can. I'm like, well, do you own the domain? She had no idea what I was talking about. I'm like, well, let's just make sure you own the domain. Unfortunately, it turned out, because very often this is the case, it's sometimes, again, done malevolently because it kind of gets the business owner by the strings. Other times it's done just because they don't want to bother their customer and they just buy the domain on their behalf with some good intent that one day they'll transfer ownership. They never get around to it, and now you have a real issue where you don't own the lot of land where you're building your house, or when you're looking to sell the house, you don't own that lot. And it's just not yours. It's not you know, you don't have the deed to your own website. Very easy to do that, and again, if the relationship is good, it's just a matter of paperwork, digital paperwork, to get the domain transferred. Of course, if the relationship sours, then it becomes a legal issue. So it's definitely something to look at.
But you can own the domain and still don't own the website.
You can own the domain, and you need not have to own the website. You could be leasing the website from a website company. So,
Yeah, or you can own the website, but the code is
correct.
by some.
Well, that's literally the same thing. Just to say that you don't own the website is the code, right? The code is, what you're looking at as public is a manifestation of the code. It's just the graphical version of the code. So it is the code. So for example, if you're leasing your website, I know in the accounting community, there's some great companies like CPA Site Solutions. Other companies like CCH will also create websites for accountants. And there are a variety of these types of companies for small business owners in just about every industry. Though I know the legal and accounting world. In those types of situations, you don't own the code, of course, right? You're paying $50, $100 a month, and you're kind of essentially leasing the website from them. And for the most part, that's not a bad thing. It is cost effective. However, when it looks at brand equity and your own image, you don't have control over it. By definition, you're renting your website, not owning it in that sense. So it's a great point. So it's the same point to bring up even for small business owners. Very rarely do you also then not own the content that's on the website, which goes back into the marketing materials, which can be the actual words on the page. So you have to be careful of that too, because even if you are leasing a website, or if you're a business owner, your clients are leasing these websites, if they've modified the words, do they own those words? And it can be that's not the case. It depends on the contract. So it's a three-part aspect, which you don't have so much in the offline marketing materials world. But however, historically, unless the work for hire is defined in the contract with graphic designers, the graphic designer would own that work. So it's something that nowadays is becoming more and more common, that they're giving up the rights to that artwork, the right to the logo, et cetera, to the company. But it's something to take a look at nonetheless. To that point, well, before I even bring up the next concept of processes, any other points or questions? Because these are great. Lots of cookies going around. Any other points? So then we look at the processes of what we're actually doing in the sales and marketing. And there's a lot of misnomers or mistakes in terms of the word advertising, marketing, and sales. And what's the difference between those three? And those are thrown around a lot. And it's like, well, there are nuances and differences. And it's important to understand those differences, or else we don't even know what we're talking about. Who can venture a guess? What's the difference between advertising versus marketing versus sales? Anyone want to venture?
Sales, I get a check.
Sales, you get a check? Okay. As a salesperson, as a sales professional? Potentially. Or as a business owner, you made the sale. Okay, it's the end result.
Advertising, you're looking to get out a concept where marketing, you're targeting certain groups.
Sure, it's a definite way of looking at it. Anyone else want to venture? Advertising is a channel, is a type of marketing. So you can be advertising, and then even in advertising, there are other sub-channels. So there's TV, radio, print for the most part, and then of course web advertising. It's a type of marketing. So, for example, to some degree, you could even argue PR, public relations, is a type of marketing. It's a channel. Now here in New York City, maybe not on a soupy day like this, but on a beautiful day, you'll probably find folks kind of handing out coupons and handing out stuff. That's street-based marketing, where it's just a type of marketing. So advertise or telemarketing is a type of advertising or marketing. Doing seminars and doing lectures, it could be a type of marketing, different from advertising, of course. Sponsorship being a type of advertising. So advertising is a channel or a way of marketing, as opposed to what marketing in general is. Why do we make that distinction? It's because people will say things like, oh, I don't advertise, all of my business is through word of mouth. And I'm like, okay, that's one way of looking at it, because technically you are not advertising, but you are marketing nonetheless. And people have to see what is that marketing process and what are they doing in all the different marketing channels. So I go back to that practice marketing cheat sheet. If you want a copy of that, which includes advertising, includes all that, email me, or I can send you a link to it. And then you can kind of download it, use it for yourself, use it for your clients. So it's pretty handy there. So in terms of looking at it here, the processes for sales versus the processes for marketing. So while there are multiple channels of marketing, which is essentially lead generation, it's generating interest for that business, be it for your practice or for your clients' businesses. How are they doing that on a continuous basis? What is a process that's documented with people and processes that can be replicated over and over again and not tied to any one person, so that it can actually be transitioned, that there is actually a manual there, very similar to what we would see in terms of a franchise, that another type of person can operate. And then comes in terms of the sales process. Once the lead comes through the office, comes through the door, the store door, how are we converting that lead into a closed business? Has that actually been documented? And unfortunately, for the most part, a lot of businesses haven't. They may actually have a marketing process. They just need to kind of codify it a little bit more. But when it comes to even in our own firms and practices, have we delineated what is that process? And it may only happen in one meeting. It may happen over a course of a number of months. Well, what is that process? And then, of course, every business owner, including us, will say, well, everyone's different. Every client is different. Every process is different. And to the most part, sure, it can be. But there are definite patterns that can be either concentrated in one meeting, or the same pattern is spread out over a number of 4 or 5 meetings, which can happen over a number of months or weeks, for example. But the pattern, nonetheless, is the same. What is that pattern, and how are they overcoming the objections, and how are they closing the sale? And that, from a marketing and then sales perspective, becomes extremely important. And then really to conclude, to kind of look at some of the basics of, now that we're in 2014, and now that digital and internet-oriented marketing is really coming in its own as here to stay, it's obviously not a fad. Even yesterday, I had someone ask me, what's the future of social media? Where do they see, and I'm like, all right, first of all, if I knew where the future of social media was, I would not be in that room, because I would be doing something else, and then kind of, skating to where the puck is. So I can't necessarily predict literally where it's going to go. However, I like to look at social media in a different perspective, and looking at it that it's not really about the internet at all, and that an internet is really just a medium, it's just a highway. If you think about it, the way you got here may be convoluted because of the Obama visit to the city, so that's convoluted. The way you get to connect with people may be a variety of ways, but it's not about really the way you got there, it's the fact that it's a connection. Well, what do I mean by that? Has anyone here been introduced to another colleague or business owner or potential referral relationship and CC'd by email? Anyone CC'd by email? Now, when you're CC'd by email, do you consider that an intranet lead, an intranet relationship, or just a word-of-mouth referral recommendation? What do you guys think? Could be both.
Both.
Both. Anyone else? Word of mouth, for the most part, word of mouth, and it could be both. And technically, you're right, because while it's just natural in word of mouth nowadays, because we're checking email throughout the day, I once had someone, an older gentleman, come up to me after one of these seminars, and he whispered in my ear, he asked, hey, by the way, how many times a week do you check your email? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, when do you log on and check your email? I'm like, yeah, how many times a week? And I'm like, I don't want to be rude, but I check my email throughout the day. Blew his mind. And he just went stunned. I don't know what he was doing at a social media seminar when probably he's not checking his email throughout the day. Probably his first step. And the reason I bring that up, because email is so natural to us nowadays, for most of us in the professional world. We're unfortunately stuck behind a screen. And nowadays, being CC'd by email is no longer internet-oriented. Yet, if we thought about it for any quick moment, obviously email is internet-oriented, is obviously electronic, we know that. But because it's so part and parcel to our day-to-day life, professionally and possibly family and socially, that we don't consider it an internet lead anymore. Same thing, I predict that it's the same thing that's going to happen, and it's already happening to a lot of us, if you're ever introduced to someone through LinkedIn or through Facebook. That right now, if you're introduced through someone to Facebook, has anyone been introduced to someone through Facebook or LinkedIn, either way? Yeah, okay, LinkedIn, way more of us because professionally. Now, do we consider that an internet introduction, or do we consider that just a word of mouth? Word of mouth, internet, word of mouth, and it's a lot more mixed. And for most of us, because people are still new to the world of LinkedIn, it feels very internet oriented because it feels foreign. You have to log into something, or it comes into your inbox and you still have to log in. So it still feels foreign and thus separate. And in that sense, it's very internet oriented. But what will probably happen in the next 2 to 3 years, very similar to what happened 10 years ago when email really became part of our lives, is that it will become more and more of a normal process. The reason I bring these concepts up is when you're helping your clients look at a business, or for yourself looking at a practice, what are they doing in terms of the 2014 basics of bringing internet marketing more normal into their world, of using it as a way of connecting with people? There are essentially 3 aspects in that. That's one aspect of changing your website from something static like a business card to something more interactive like a blog, where it's more of a resource that you're using from a marketing standpoint to generate more business, as well as being a resource for their current customers, be it for your own practice or your clients' businesses. So using it as more of a resource where it's interactive and it's a library of knowledge, not just a brochure that's sitting there static. The second aspect, and that's the blogging world. The second of looking at how are they using social media in a more normal way. Unfortunately, you'll hear a lot of people using social media as a direct marketing campaign of selling directly to people, as opposed to it being a social media. Now, I only have about maybe 2 more minutes left, so I'll conclude by looking at it as...
You can ask some questions after.
Yeah, sure. So feel free to ask questions and drag out my session. Of looking at it from how are they using social media truly as a way of connecting with their customers and creating a community. And that's a huge important, because you'll hear it a lot of social media marketing companies, social media campaigns, even in the businesses that you're looking at, of looking at social media as a direct marketing campaign of how can I reach customers? And unfortunately, it's really how can I reach referral relationships? And I say unfortunately because it sounds a lot less efficient, because people want to use social media as an advertising campaign. And there is a world of social advertising, and you'll see a whole lot of advertising happening on Facebook and LinkedIn, etc., separate from what people are supposed to be doing in terms of the social media, of getting to know one another. How is the company, the business, using social media to build bridges and a community to and with their customers and between their customers? It's extremely important, or else there's not going to be traction. The reason why certain brands have a huge loyal fan base is because they're creating a sense of community. And we know those brands of Apple and Harley, etc. We hear them all the time, and those are the companies that tend to make social media work because they're already a fan base. They're already a social media. And social media has unfortunately become bought out by the internet world. So you say social media, and we forget about this room being social media. And this is what social media is about, is people connecting with people. So I bring that up in the sense of looking at it of, are they doing it the right way, or is it just an advertising channel in that sense? Third is kind of going back to basics, email newsletters. It's like one of those standards. It's like having a brochure. It's like having a business card. They haven't actually tapped into their customer database to develop that rudimentary sense of community. It's one of the things that you want to look at immediately in terms of a sales and marketing process. So as I conclude, in terms of results tracking, there are 3 ways that a business can be checking and tracking the results of their marketing. The first way is all the geeky stuff, the hits and clicks. I don't have time to go into the Google Analytics and the WordPress metrics and all the sorts of numbers on a screen, stuff that you're used to as accountants, stuff that are very black and white, but of course numbers can mean a whole lot of things. So the hits and clicks, unfortunately, in terms of results tracking and marketing, to my opinion, mean very little. While it may make people feel good, if it's not translated into the anecdotal evidence and then actually people walking through the door, I don't really care how many people visited the website. Has it actually translated into sales? It's a very common sense question, but unfortunately when you start pouring into reports, a lot of marketing companies get distracted with the hits and clicks. And while there is some type of over a period of time a correlation that for every 1,000 clicks maybe you get 1 customer, it could of course be 10 of the right clicks lead to the 1 customer. Anecdotally, it's going to be comments, it's going to be the interaction that happens because of the website. And there's a variety of aspects I can talk about in terms of what I call anecdotal evidence, meaning hard to completely measure. You can measure it, but more importantly, it's really measuring what's happening in the intake process. One last point I'll make, and then I'll turn it over to Gene, is Are you in your own intake processes, when someone walks in the door, what are you doing to capture their information? So many times when I talk to law firms and accounting firms, they still forget and fail to capture the email address at the intake process on the phone call itself. Why is that important? Because they may not be ready to work with you right now, but they may be ready in a couple of months from now, and you're able to stay in contact with them with a simple email newsletter. It's a tip for you as practitioners. It's also a tip for your business owner clientele. In that sense, very few of us also even ask those rudimentary marketing research questions. Maybe not when they walk in the door. How did you hear from us? Did you get a chance to visit our website? Did you read of any of the blog articles on our website? It need not be the first question, but it can be the last question of that meeting. When they're walking out, hey, by the way, did you get a chance to visit our website? Did you read anything? And even if the answer is no, they're probably going to go back to their home, back to their office, and do that. And now that they're remembering you and remembering you as a resource, they're more apt to recommend you and recommend the owners that you work with. Thank you. My name is VIK RAJAN at phoneblogger.net.